I always thought betrayal would come with noise. Raised voices, slammed doors, maybe even shattered glass. But in my case, it was quiet. Too quiet. It started with a dusty drawer in my husband's old roll-top desk, a drawer I hadn't opened in years. I was looking for a stapler. That's all. Something mundane. Instead, I found a thin manila envelope wedged between an outdated phone book and a crumpled grocery list. Charles Hart, Last Will and Testament, typed neatly across the front. My breath caught, not because I expected anything bad, but because I suddenly realized I'd never actually seen the latest version. We made one together 20 years ago when the kids were still young. We'd agreed the house would go to me first, then Claire and Ryan. We even joked about it. Well, if we both die in a plane crash, at least the kids get something. It was one of those harmless, morbid laughs couples share when they still believe they're on the same team. The paper inside was crisp, the kind that doesn't wrinkle easily. Charles had updated it 3 years before his stroke. And just like that, 3 cold paragraphs witnessed, notarized it, erased me. The house, our savings, the lake cabin we built with our bare hands over 2 summers, even my mother's heirloom ring, all of it went to a name I'd never heard in my life. Grace Whitmore. I read it 3 times, certain I was misreading. Grace. Who the hell was Grace? Not a cousin, not a neighbor, not even someone from his Rotary Club. My first thought was the worst had he been cheating on me. My second thought was worse than that, because right there on the next page were the witnesses, Claire Bennett, Ryan Hart, my own children. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger right away. My body just stopped. I sat in the creaky desk chair, like someone unplugged me from the wall. For a long minute I stared at the pattern on the rug, a faded floral I always meant to replace, and all I could think was how ridiculous it was that I had vacuumed this room yesterday. Vacuumed while my entire life sat waiting to ambush me in a drawer. That night, I didn't turn on the TV, didn't eat dinner. I just walked around the house we'd lived in for 40 years, touching the walls like they might tell me what went wrong. The photos on the hallway shelf blurred into strangers. Charles in his fishing vest smiling beside Ryan, Claire at her college graduation. Even me standing stiffly at Christmas with a red sweater I didn't even like, all of it felt fake. I picked up the cordless phone 3 times before I finally set it down again. Instead, I sent Claire a text. Me, can you come by tomorrow? There's something I found. About Dad. She replied instantly. At 11:42 p.m., no hesitation. Claire, Mom, please don't overreact. It's not what you think. The words sat there glowing on the screen like an open wound. Not what I think. How would she know what I thought unless she already knew what I'd seen? I didn't sleep. I just sat at the kitchen table staring at the teacup I'd left in the sink after lunch. It had a tiny chip near the handle. Charles had bought it for me on our 25th anniversary, said it reminded him of me, delicate but sturdy. How ironic. By morning, the house felt different. Hollow. Like the furniture was just there for decoration, and the real weight of the place, the memories, the shared life had crawled out, and left a shell behind. I went to the lawyer's office I remembered from years ago, the same brick building with peeling paint on the window frames. The receptionist recognized my name too quickly. "Oh, Mrs. Hart, you're here about the will," she said, smiling too tightly like she already knew how this conversation would go. The lawyer was young, too young to have known us. He reviewed the file, his voice professional but flat, like he'd said these words 100 times before. "Yes, Mrs. Hart. It's legally binding. I'm sorry. Can it be contested?" I asked. He hesitated. "Only if there's evidence of fraud or diminished capacity. But 3 years ago, he was of sound mind." Of course he was. Charles had always been sharp. sharp enough to plan this betrayal long before I could even suspect it. I left the office with a copy of the will folded neatly in my purse like it was just another errand I'd finished. Outside, the sky was pale, washed out. It felt like the world had lost its colour. When I got home, I made a cup of tea. I didn't drink. Then I sat in the living room, staring at the door, waiting for Claire. And for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't sure what I would say when my own daughter walked in. Claire didn't come the next day. She texted instead. Busy showing a property. "Can we talk this weekend? Like this was some casual catch-up over coffee. Ryan didn't reply at all. I'd sent him the same message, just one sentence. I need to discuss Dad's will. Silence. That told me everything. For 2 days, I moved through the house like it was someone else's. I opened cupboards and closed them. Dusted shelves that didn't need dusting. At one point, I caught myself polishing Charles's fishing trophies in the den, like keeping them clean would somehow make this whole thing less dirty. It didn't. I thought about calling my friend Linda, but what would I even say? Hey, turns out my husband planned a secret life after death, and my children helped him erase me. How's your week? I couldn't yet put it into words. On the third morning, I decided to do something I never imagined I would. I went to find her. Grace Whitmore. The name from the will. The stranger who somehow now owned my entire life. Her address was listed in the legal paperwork. A modest street across town lined with tidy bungalows. Not the kind of neighborhood for some glamorous mistress. It was quiet, unassuming. Her house was pale blue with a wraparound porch and a wind chime tinkling softly in the breeze. There was a neat little flower bed by the front steps, petunias and daisies, nothing extravagant. A cat sat in the window blinking lazily in the sunlight. I stood there for a long time before I knocked. My hand hovered over the doorbell. What was I even going to say? "Hello, I'm the wife of the man who left you everything. Do you want the keys now or later?" Before I could decide, the door opened. She was older than I expected. Late 60s, maybe. Slim. Graceful in a way that felt natural. She wasn't draped in designer clothes or perfume. Just a simple cardigan and slacks, her grey hair pulled back loosely. Her eyes widened the moment she saw me. "You're Evelyn," she said quietly. Not a question. A statement. I nodded. "And you're Grace." She stepped aside. "Would you like to come in?" The living room was warm, homey. Soft music played from an old radio on the shelf. Books stacked neatly on the coffee table. There were no pictures of Charles anywhere. In fact, there were no pictures of anyone. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, pouring tea into 2 mismatched mugs. "I wasn't planning to," I admitted. My voice sounded distant even to me. I just needed to see for myself. Grace sat across from me. She didn't look nervous, just resigned. "I didn't know," she said finally. "Not until the lawyer called after he passed. I didn't ask for any of it." I stared at her. "So you and my husband were you?" "No." She cut in gently. "Not like that. We were friends for a while. He came to the community clinic where I volunteered. He told me he was lonely, that you'd pulled away, that he felt invisible in his own home." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Invisible? That's rich." Grace looked down at her tea. I believed him. Maybe I shouldn't have. I never thought he'd well rewrite his life like that. Something shifted in me then. I'd come expecting to find a villain, but instead, I found another victim of Charles's half-truths. "I don't want it," she said quietly. "The house, the money, any of it. I was going to refuse, but I didn't know how to reach you without making it worse." I just stared at her, trying to process. "You'd walk away?" She nodded. Yes. It doesn't belong to me. For the first time in days, I felt a tiny flicker of something not hope, exactly, but relief's distant cousin. When I left her house, the wind had picked up. The chimes on her porch sang a strange, gentle melody. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking back at her silhouette in the doorway. She wasn't my enemy. She was just a name on paper that Charles had used like a shield. Back in my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. I knew then what I had to do. This wasn't about confronting ghosts anymore. It was about taking back what was still mine. I didn't text Claire or Ryan again. I didn't call. I just waited. 2 days later, I told them both to come over for dinner. No explanation, no details. When they arrived, I didn't cook. The table was bare except for a single manila envelope. Claire walked in first heels, clicking like she owned the place. "Mum, what's going on?" "You sounded off." Ryan followed phone in hand, barely looking up. "I can only stay an hour," he said. "I've got a call with a client." I sat at the head of the table, still as stone. "Sit down," I said. My voice was calm, but they both hesitated before obeying. I slid the envelope toward them. "You already know what's inside. I just wanted you to see it on my table in my house while I'm still breathing." Ryan glanced at Claire. She shifted in her seat, crossing her arms. "I saw the will," I said flatly. Silence. Claire was the first to speak. "Mum, it's complicated." "Dad." "No," I cut her off. "It's not complicated. He erased me, and you stood beside him and watched." Ryan finally looked up from his phone. His jaw tightened. "Mum, it wasn't like that. He said you'd be fine. That you didn't." I leaned forward. Didn't what? Didn't need a roof over my head. Didn't need the money I helped him save, or didn't deserve to know the truth. They both froze. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I let the quiet do the work. "You both signed it," I continued. "You looked him in the eye while he handed my life to a stranger. And you didn't say a word." Ryan cleared his throat. "We didn't think she'd actually claim anything." "She didn't," I said. That made them both blink. What Claire asked. "Grace Whitmore doesn't want it," I said calmly. "She's signing a refusal. Everything comes back to me." They just stared, the shock flickering across their faces. "Why would she do that?" Ryan muttered. "Because she isn't who you think she is," I said. "She was a pawn. Just like you." Claire frowned. "Mom, you don't understand." "Dad? I understand perfectly." My voice sharpened, cutting the air. "I understand that for years you two smiled at me across this table while you kept his secret. You thought I'd never find out. You thought I'd just keep playing the role quiet, accommodating, disposable." Claire opened her mouth, then shut it again. Ryan rubbed his temple like this was some minor inconvenience in his day. I leaned back in my chair. "I went to see a lawyer today." That got their attention. "I'm moving everything into a trust. The house, the savings, what's left of my pension. It's going somewhere it won't be touched by people who think loyalty is optional." Ryan's brows furrowed. "You can't seriously be thinking about cutting us out." I smiled, small but sharp. "I'm not thinking about it. I've already done it." Claire's face went pale. "Mom, you can't mean that. We're your children." "And I was your mother." I said, my voice soft but edged. "Still am. But you stopped being my family the moment you chose silence over honesty." Ryan slammed his palm on the table. "This is revenge." "No," I said calmly. "This is correction." The room fell quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with things no one wants to say out loud. Claire finally stood, grabbing her coat like it was suddenly too heavy. "You'll regret this," she muttered. I met her eyes. "No, I'm done regretting." They left together like two kids covering for each other after breaking a window. Neither looked back. When the door closed, I exhaled slowly. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window at the maple tree in the yard. For the first time in weeks, I felt something steady settle inside me. This was just the beginning. The morning after Claire and Ryan left the house felt cleaner. Not in the literal sense, just lighter, like their absence scrubbed away the last traces of pretense. I made oatmeal the slow way, stirring it on the stove instead of microwaving it. I ate by the kitchen window, watching a squirrel dart across the lawn. It was the first breakfast in weeks that didn't taste like ash. By noon, I was sitting in a small downtown office across from Dana Price. She wasn't like the young lawyer from before Dana had that sharp, no-nonsense look about her, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun and glasses perched low on her nose. She glanced over the copy of Charles's will, then looked at me. "I've seen worse," she said dryly. I almost smiled. "Worse than leaving your wife of 40 years with nothing." Dana set the papers down. "What's worse is when the widow finds out too late to protect anything she still has. You're not too late. So what do you want to do?" I thought about that for a moment. What did I want? Not revenge. Not really. Just protection. Something that couldn't be taken from me again. "I want to move everything I can into a trust," I said. "My savings, my pension, the car, the few investments I still have." Dana nodded. "And the house, it reverts back to me next month, once Grace signs the refusal." "Good," she said, scribbling notes. "We'll add it once it's back in your name." "Do you want to name your children as beneficiaries?" I looked her straight in the eye. "No. My granddaughter, Maya. She's the only one who still sees me. Everyone else can inherit their silence." Dana arched a brow but didn't comment. "All right, we'll draft the paperwork today. But you should know, they might push back. Hard." I gave a small, humorless laugh. "Let them." Meanwhile, Claire and Ryan were already plotting. I didn't need to hear their conversations to know. Ryan called 3 times that week, each time sounding more polished and controlled than the last. "Mum, you're making emotional decisions. Let's be rational. We can talk about this without lawyers." Claire texted late at night. "Don't let Grace get in your head. Dad loved you. This is just a misunderstanding." Neither of them mentioned the trust directly. Not yet. But I could feel it. They were circling like sharks that smelled blood in the water but didn't want to strike too soon. So I didn't respond. Instead, I started cleaning out the house. Not in a frantic way, one room at a time. I boxed up Charles's clothes, donated half the china set I never used, stacked old family photos in neat piles, one for Claire, one for Ryan. I kept only the pictures that felt like me, on my first day teaching me with Maya at the zoo, me on the porch swing before Charles ever came into the picture. There was something freeing about it, like peeling away old wallpaper you never really liked but had learned to live with. When I opened the drawer of Charles's old desk, I found one more thing I hadn't noticed before: a small photo of him fishing with Ryan. On the back in his handwriting, it said, "For the son who will always understand me." I stared at it for a long time. Not angry, just done. 2 weeks later, Dana called. "Your trust is finalized," she said. "But you should know, your children have already contacted an attorney. They're fishing for a way to contest it." Of course they were. Dana hesitated. "They'll probably claim you're acting out of spite, that you're emotionally unstable since Charles passed." Do you want to prepare for that? Yes, I said. My voice didn't waver. Let them come. I'm not afraid anymore. I hung up and stood at the window. The maple tree outside had started to change color, deep red at the edges, like it was burning quietly from the inside out. For the first time in my life, I felt exactly like that tree. Not dying, just changing. And there was no turning back. The courthouse smelled like old carpet and fluorescent lights. Not the grand echoing kind you see in movies, just a dull, tired building with scuffed floors and beige walls. I wore a plain grey coat and simple shoes. No jewellery, no makeup. I didn't want to look like someone performing grief or vengeance. I wanted to look like someone who had nothing left to prove. Claire and Ryan were already seated on the other side of the room, leaning close to their lawyer, a slick young man with a too-perfect haircut and a smirk he couldn't quite hide. Claire's lips were pressed tight, her nails immaculate. Ryan glanced at his watch every 30 seconds like he was impatient for this nuisance to end. They didn't look at me. Dana sat beside me, flipping through her folder. Calm, unbothered. It won't take long, she murmured. The judge entered. She was older, with soft grey hair, and a face that looked like it had seen every kind of human mess there was. Her eyes flicked briefly to me, then to my children, as she called the session to order. Ryan's lawyer stood first. He spoke with the smooth confidence of someone who believed the story would bend his way. Your Honour, he began, we are here today because Mrs. Hart, while grieving the loss of her husband, made impulsive, emotionally charged decisions. In an act of retaliation against her late husband's estate plan, she created a trust that excludes her 2 adult children, effectively disinheriting them. We contend that this trust was established under emotional duress and may be an act of undue influence. I felt my jaw tighten. Retaliation. Duress. Like they hadn't been the ones to plant the knife first. Dana rose calmly when it was her turn. Your Honour, what my client has done is neither impulsive nor retaliatory. It is corrective. She learned that her husband and children knowingly concealed a will that disinherited her, leaving her with nothing after decades of marriage and sacrifice. In response, she chose to protect what is rightfully hers and to ensure it is passed to someone who values her. That is not retaliation. That is preservation. The judge nodded slightly, then turned to me. Mrs. Hart, she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. Do you wish to add anything yourself? I stood. My knees didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I looked at my children for the first time. Claire shifted uncomfortably. Ryan stared straight ahead, expression unreadable. I spoke clearly, each word deliberate. No one promised me a home, I said. No one guaranteed me loyalty. I earned that with decades of care, of sacrifices no one saw, of silence I thought was love. I didn't ask my husband for repayment. I didn't ask my children for gratitude. I asked them for honesty. And they chose to lie. The room was so quiet I could hear someone's pen click 3 rows back. I changed the trust, not because I wanted revenge, I continued. I changed it because I finally understood something. If the people you love can erase you so easily, you owe them nothing except the truth. And the truth is, this love without respect isn't love. It's convenience. And I will no longer make myself convenient for anyone. Claire's face drained of colour. Ryan swallowed hard, his jaw twitching. I looked at the judge. That's all. I sat back down. The judge reviewed the file, her eyes scanning the paperwork with slow precision. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. Petition denied. The trust stands. It was over in less than 15 minutes. Claire looked like she wanted to argue, but their lawyer touched her arm, signalling it was done. Ryan exhaled sharply, shaking his head like this was just another business deal gone wrong. They stood to leave without looking at me. Not a word. Not even a glance. Dana packed her papers calmly. "They won't try again," she said softly. I nodded. I didn't watch them walk out. Outside, the sky was pale blue. Cool air brushed across my face as I stepped onto the courthouse steps. For a moment, I just stood there feeling the weight of it all, not heavy like before, but lighter. It didn't feel like victory exactly, more like release. Dana touched my shoulder. "You did well." "I didn't do it for them," I said. "I did it for me." She smiled faintly. "Good. Most people forget that part." As she walked away, I stayed on the steps for a little longer, watching the cars pass, feeling the sun on my face. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone. The house didn't feel like mine anymore, not even after Grace's refusal came through and the deed reverted back into my name. It was just walls now, rooms echoing with too many lies. I couldn't walk down the hallway without seeing the ghosts of all the nights I'd sat waiting for someone to appreciate the things I quietly held together. So I called a realtor. Stephanie was young, bright-eyed, and talked fast, like she was used to convincing people that change was exciting, not terrifying. "It's a great market," she said, walking through the living room with a clipboard. "We'll have offers in days." "Are you sure you're ready?" "Yes," I said simply. She blinked like she expected hesitation. "Do you want to buy something else?" "A condo, maybe closer to town." "No," I said again. "I just want something smaller, something that's mine." 2 weeks later, I accepted an offer from a young couple expecting their first baby. I watched them walk through the house, pointing at corners and measuring windows like they could already see their future there. And for the first time, I didn't feel protective or bitter. I just felt done. I moved into a small apartment above a bookstore on the edge of downtown. 1 bedroom, crooked floors, windows that let in too much light. The kind of place where you could hear the wind slip through the cracks and the sound of people's lives below laughter footsteps, the low hum of a city that didn't know your name. I brought almost nothing with me. A few clothes, a kettle, my mother's brooch, and the envelope of photographs I'd kept for myself. The first night I sat by the window with a mug of tea, listening to the faint buzz of the streetlights. It was quiet, but not the suffocating quiet of the house. This was a gentle quiet, a clean slate. A week later, Maya knocked on my door. She stood there in a raincoat, her hair damp and curling at the edges, holding a tote bag. "Grandma," she said, "can I stay a few days?" I stepped aside without asking why. She moved through the tiny apartment like she'd always been there, pulling 2 mismatched mugs from the cupboard the same way I used to when I was her age. We sat at the small round table, steam rising between us. She didn't speak at first. Then she sighed. "Mum says I'm ungrateful for siding with you. Dad says I don't understand the full picture. I just don't want to lie for them anymore." I watched her quietly. "Then don't." She nodded, her eyes shining. "I don't want to turn into them." "You won't," I said softly. "You came here, didn't you?" She smiled faintly, looking around the apartment. "This place feels like you. It feels honest." Later that night, after she'd gone to bed on the pull-out couch, I sat by the window again. I opened my notebook and wrote just 1 line. "Sometimes family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up when you stop pretending everything's fine." The next morning, Maya helped me rearrange the few things I had. We laughed as we struggled to move the thrift store dresser into the corner. It felt good. Easy. She showed me her new photography prints, black and white shots of overlooked things, a bent spoon in a dish rack, rain sliding down a window pane. Simple things. Honest things. "This is what I want to do," she said. "Capture the things people stop noticing." I smiled. "Then don't stop. Someone needs to see them." And for the first time, I realized I wasn't rebuilding. I wasn't starting over. I was starting for the very first time. The letter came on a Tuesday. It was thick, too heavy for an apology, addressed in Ryan's precise, angular handwriting. I let it sit on the table while I made tea. I didn't even open it until the kettle whistled. 6 pages. Typed. Careful. Cold. He used words like regret and unfortunate. Phrases like, "If you feel hurt and we wish things had gone differently." But nowhere did he write, "I'm sorry." Nowhere did he say we knew it was wrong. He ended with a single request. "Let's re-establish communication. Family deserves a chance to repair." I folded the letter neatly. Then I tore it in half. Then again, and again. Not out of anger, out of clarity. He hadn't written to me. He'd written to his conscience. And that was no longer my job to carry. That same afternoon, I walked to the little travel agency tucked between the bookstore and the bakery. The woman behind the counter asked where I wanted to go. "Lisbon," I said. "One way or round trip one way." She blinked, but didn't question it. When I left, I held the ticket in my hand, like it was something alive. Maya came over the next day. She noticed the envelope on the counter with the airline's logo. "Lisbon," she asked. I nodded. "It's a place I always wanted to see. Charles said it was impractical. Too far. Too expensive." She smiled softly. "So you're going?" "Yes," I said. "This time I'm not asking permission to live." She hugged me tight. "Can I visit?" "Of course," I said, "but I won't wait to go." Chach. On the morning of my flight, I stood by the window one last time. The crooked floors, the sunlight spilling across the thrifted table, the sound of the street below. It was enough. At the airport, I didn't look back. On the plane, I opened my red notebook, the one I started after the hearing. I turned to a blank page and wrote one final line. This isn't a story about what I lost. It's a story about what I took back. And as the plane lifted into the clouds, I felt its freedom, quiet and absolute. No anger, no revenge, just me. Finally, just me. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come quietly from the people you trusted the most. Evelyn's story reminds us that silence can wound just as much as words, and that love without respect is nothing more than convenience. It shows us how easy it is to become invisible in our own lives when we give endlessly without asking for honesty in return. But it also teaches that it's never too late to draw a line, reclaim your worth, and choose a life that reflects who you truly are, even if it means leaving behind the people you once called family. Justice isn't always about winning battles in courtrooms or proving others wrong. It's about choosing yourself when no one else will. For anyone who has felt overlooked, erased, or used, this is a reminder that your value doesn't depend on how others treat you. You have the right to walk away from what diminishes you and step into a future where your voice matters. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to find your strength in the aftermath of someone else's betrayal? Share your feelings or experiences in the comments. I read everyone. If you believe in stories that honor resilience and quiet strength, hit like to show support and subscribe so you don't miss more stories that spark reflection and hope. May you find peace in knowing it's never too late to begin again.